Okay, what's up? Pastor Matt back here. Finishing up this little brief three-part series on Bible translations. I want to talk about the New King James Version right now. The New King James. Excellent, beautiful translation of the Bible. And what I like about it is it has the perfect balance between tradition and modernism. And what I mean by that is the New King James Version is, of course, a revision of the King James with slightly updated language. And so it maintains that cadence, that rhythm, that traditional sound that the King James Version has, while occasionally updating some of the language, taking out the these and the thous, removing those completely, using more modern pronouns, and also sometimes updating words that have become archaic and have fallen out of use in the English language. So the New King James is probably the best balance between old and new. If we want to preserve the legacy of the King James tradition, but we want it to be readable and understandable to a modern audience, then the New King James Version does that almost perfectly. The New King James, I did a little study myself, and I went back to a couple of translations that are revisions of the King James. I used the MEV, the Modern English Version, which is a light revision of the King James. I used the ESV, and I used the New King James. And what I did is I took a bunch of passages that are fairly common, the Lord's Prayer, the Ten Commandments, Psalm 23, etc., and I looked to see which one altered the King James Version the least. And it turned out that the New King James was the clear winner. It is the closest that I'm aware of to a modern version of the King James, and so it's beautiful. Secondly, it is a literal translation as well. If you are translating from the Greek or the Hebrew, you're going to find that the New King James does an excellent job of staying very, very faithful to the text in a word-for-word translation style. And not only that, but here's a good thing, it has not been updated since it originally came out. Yet. Now we're all sitting back hoping that somebody doesn't get this brilliant idea to update the New King James and make it another one of these gender-inclusive, sort of liberal progressive translations, really hoping that they never do that. So I think Thomas Nelson owns the rights to the New King James. I would just implore them, please do not update the New King James, because I have a feeling it would probably go in a progressive direction that I wouldn't be comfortable in. All right, now let me mention something that's really interesting about the New King James, almost nuanced. The New King James is one of the few modern translations that has stuck with the old manuscripts that were used to translate the King James. That would be the Byzantine manuscript tradition without incorporating the newer discovered manuscripts, mostly Alexandrian manuscripts. And so the New King James is translated from what's called the TR, or the Textus Receptus. That would be the Greek New Testament as it was best published in the Reformation era. Now, since then, you probably already know this, other Greek manuscripts have been discovered. Lots of other manuscripts and fragments thanks to the work of archaeologists. Great advances have been taken in terms of manuscript tradition, and most of the new modern translations have taken those newer discovered manuscripts into account. Now, without getting overly complex here, the Byzantine manuscripts are by far the numerical majority, and they are geographically further dispersed than the Alexandrian manuscripts. So there's wider geographic discovery field, and there's more of them. However, what gets tricky is that the Alexandrian manuscripts tend to be older. And so what do you prefer? Do you prefer more manuscripts Byzantine, or do you prefer older but fewer Alexandrian? Okay? Well, the New King James sticks with what the King James translators used back in the early 1600s. And so for that reason, it's going to stay much closer to the original King James, the authorized version. Now, one final thought on the New King James, and one that I really appreciate, is that it is really the perfect balance between the old and the new. Let's suppose that you're going to a Bible study and half the people have the King James, the old King James. New King James is going to be no problem for you to follow along and to read right alongside them. If your preacher uses the King James, but you want something more modern and understandable, the King James and the New King James, they parallel and sync with each other so well. And yet here's the thing. If your preacher uses the ESV, but for whatever reason, maybe you're a TR manuscript person, you can use the New King James, and the New King James and the ESV are mutually intelligible as well. I mean, they read fairly parallel between each other. And so the New King James really does and sort of inhabit the perfect space between the older and the archaic and the newer and the modern. And so I'm surprised more readers, preachers, and teachers don't use the New King James, and I kind of wish they did, because I do like maintaining the King James tradition in its language and its flow and its cadence. I do know that R.C. Sproul, who's now deceased, but he was a New King James guy, often preached from it. In fact, when the Reformation Study Bible came out, it was first of all in the New King James before it came out in the ESV. And a lot of his commentaries, if you look on the very front matter, it'll say that the translation, unless otherwise noted, is the New King James. So unless I'm really missing something, R.C. Sproul used and preferred the New King James Version. I don't exactly know why. Maybe he was a TR, Textus Receptus guy. I don't know. But the New King James is a wonderful, wonderful Bible translation. I commend it to you. And so what I'm going to do, like the other videos in the series, is I'm going to post in the description of this video some suggestions of NKJV Bibles for you. Everything from some cheaper, easy to get editions to some study Bibles, and then finally to maybe a little bit more expensive New King James if you want one that you can pass on to your children, one that's really going to hold up well. Okay, so thanks for checking out this 3-part series. Hope you learned something. Feel free to comment, disagree, argue, whatever you want to do in the comments. It makes it fun. Thanks for checking in. Love you lots. See you soon.